Hi, and welcome to this podcast. This podcast is called Four Mics, Four Men. And with me today, we have three other distinguished gentlemen. I'll let them introduce themselves, but I'll go ahead and start. My name is Gabriel Henry Jr., otherwise known as CJ. And I was born in Houston, and I was raised to two wonderful island people. And so the island spirit is entrenched in me. So it'll be interesting when we get into each one of our journeys to manhood, where you'll find the blending of cultures discussed as well. But for right now, let me hand it off to Lester Smith.
Okay, my name's Lester Smith. I come from West Indian parentage also. My dad's from Barbados and my mom is from the Virgin Islands. And I think you mentioned New York. You're from New York. So I was born in New York also, and then I moved to Miami, then came to Dallas, and so I'm CJ's brother-in-law, just in case. And the person down below is, or you'll meet son-in-law. There you go. And then the other person's brother-in-law. So.
All right. So then, since we went in that order, we'll go ahead and kick it off to Dad, otherwise known as Pastor Henry.
Well, I'm happy to be in this forum and to be able to just share a few things relative to my journey. I was born in Jamaica, beautiful Caribbean island. I had about 11 siblings. The twins died, of course, but when they were just a few months. But and then from there, in the Kingston area, I went to live with my aunt in Upper St. Andrew, and when I was about 7, and so on, spent some years there, back into Kingston, and then from Kingston, eventually to New York, and here in Texas, Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, nice. So we'll get into your journey here, because I think that's going to be an interesting story, since you've migrated, and we're first. Some of us are first generation born here in the States. So let's kick it over to Gabriel. Go ahead, Gabriel. Introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Gabriel Santos Jr. and I wasn't born here in the States. I was born in Canada. So I stand out there. But my parents are from the Caribbean. My dad's from Haiti. My mom is from Martinique, small French island. So in fact, I spoke French before I spoke English. So it's a whole experience living in another country. Learning English as I went through school, but definitely going to a Caribbean church though on Sabbath. So really having both cultures growing up, the French Canadian culture as well as the Haitian culture, going to church every Sabbath.
That's good, and I can't wait to dive into the stories here. So why don't we do this? First of all, why don't you tell me a bit about your family? Because I think before we get into the journey, it's important to understand the family dynamic so that the audience can also understand the different perspectives that we're coming from as we discuss various topics. So let's start with Lester.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna have to adjust the order. I don't want to be first every time, but I will. I will go forward. So yeah, pretty much like I mentioned before. I come from a broken home. As far as my parents getting divorced, they got divorced when I was around 13 years old, and so I'm almost sure as people get to know me, I'll be bringing up this subject often because it bothered me. But I am the youngest of 4 siblings. I have 2 siblings, a pair, a brother and sister on my dad's side, and I got another pair of brother and sister on my mom's side. And then they had me together. However, I grew up with my mom's my brother and sister that's on my mom's side. So it wasn't until I got to high school that I actually realized that they're my half brother sister. But I always treated them all because that's the way I was taught. This is your brother or sister. So I kind of taught. That's that's the way pretty much I understood. So, but yeah, I did most of my growing up in Miami, like I mentioned before, and my parents, they got divorced when I was around 13. I think I mentioned that. And I saw it happening but didn't understand what was happening, and so besides that, then I started to go to Christian school education. I did Christian education. I went to public school for a little while too. And then once I got to high school to academy, I turned around and I just stayed with Christian education the whole time. So I went to Oakwood for my career. I'm a CPA, and I went to Oakwood for my career, and that's it as far as my bringing up. I don't know what exactly you want me to say about. I have more, but I don't know.
We'll
That may be
dive
enough.
into it.
Okay. Right.
And he humbly says CPA, but this man is a man of many tricks, many talents, many tricks, all of the above.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, since we'll shift up the order a little bit, Gabriel, why don't you tell us about your background?
Well, so I grew up in Montreal, in Canada. I was the only child for 9.5 years, so it's interesting growing up only child. Wanting the sibling, wanting to have somebody around, and when they're around, you're like, wait a minute. But I definitely love so I have one sister. I love my sister, and it's always nice to have family. So at the age of 10, she was like my little toy. We play games, But things changed, of course, when I went to college, because I went to college in Andrews, and she stayed in Canada. So I think that created a little distance between the two of us. I think just because now I come back, I'm in college, and you're only 10 years old. I can't you. So I think it created a little distance between us. As far as my parents, very loving. And I think you'll see, all of us have different backgrounds as far as Caribbean parents, but the Haitian parents, especially my dad, his thing was really about being a provider, a disciplinarian. Some of the things that I wanted more of, I love the Cosby Show because Theo and his dad, it just seemed like, man, buddies, man, they're playing basketball. My dad might have played a few times, hockey, Canada.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was about discipline, about providing. So I guess that's something that me now being a man affected me is I want to be there for my boys. I got two boys. I want to be with them. I want to play with them. I want to be more than just provide or disciplinarian, but let them know that I love them and all the time. So I think that I would say right now would be a good introduction to me. The effects of my childhood has affected me now being a dad. That I really want to shower them with what I felt might have been missing with my growing up.
All right, and I'll jump in front of my dad because he shared a little more into his background earlier. But so I was born in Houston, of course, to my parents who are both from Jamaica. My mom being full Indian, but from Jamaica. And my dad, of course, Black from Jamaica as well. So it was an interesting blend of cultures. And, one of the things that I'll speak to later on when we start getting into the cultural sides of things is, sometimes when you have that blend, it's a matter of trying to figure out where you fit in or, which groups do you identify with? And we'll kind of get into that piece of it. But I have two siblings, two older sisters, and I'm not gonna lie. After I was born, I was sitting there waiting and waiting because I figured there should have been another boy so that I could have a brother.
Yeah.
When my sisters would lock up in the room and have their conversation, then I'm left on the outside.
Mhm.
Sometimes with my ear to the door because I didn't understand. I wanted
Mhm.
to not be left out as well.
Mhm.
But it was interesting growing up with two sisters, and I think that kind of helped to shape how I view certain things that we'll get into later on in life because of understanding having the sister side of things. So before we get further into the questions here, let's throw it over to Dad. Go ahead and share a little bit more about your background.
Well, yes. As I said, when I was in Kingston, at about the age of 7, because I was born really up in St. Andrew, a place called Belmore Hill. And during there was a time when there was going to be a hurricane,
Mm,
and my mother, we were living on a hill, and between the hill that we were living on and another hill on the other side, there was this this uh, deep ravine, we called gully, this big gully, and and what happened was she had a dream. She just felt uncomfortable that night when it was going to be storming, and so she decided. She told my dad to just move from that place. They moved. Fortunately, they did because the entire place was washed away. But
Wow.
since that time, we went to when I was about 3, I think we went to Kingston, and I lived there for a while. I mentioned before that we had I had 7. There was 11 of us, but I was about the 7th, and the last 2, which are the twins, died. But my the brother that I followed, we had feuds going on periodically and all of that. And there was one incident when I was out in the yard with a hoe, and he was out there too because we were always hanging out together. Um,
Uh,
and we were He was standing by a tree, and I had the hoe, and I was kind of digging, and when I got close to him, and I said, "Well,
mhm.
move your foot," you know.
Uh,
And he, as stubborn as I was, both of us were stubborn, and he would not move. And I actually brought the hoe down and nearly severed his big toe.
oh.
I don't know if that was one of the reasons they
Uh,
decided to send me to live with my aunt in up in St. Andrew, Mount Friendship area, where I attended the elementary school and so on. But in those days, though, you had when a family had a number of children, and because they were economically challenged,
mhm.
they couldn't handle all of them, and so
Mhm.
they would uh, farm them out, in a sense, send them to live with I would say a friend or a relative, and so on. And so that was the case there, and but it was my parents were very
Mhm.
religious members of the Church of God Church. The aunt I lived with was also a member, so I I, I had this strong religious background,
Mhm.
mm,
and it was at her place, my aunt's place, that I learned to read and
Mhm.
write and all those things. I attended school there, and then back to Kingston, and then in Kingston, continued schooling and so on. Loved soccer and some other sports that involved with all that. There were 4 of us who, 4 brothers of us who were deeply into sports, and we were together most of the time playing, so on. Then eventually, after a number of years, where I began working after I left the schooling and so on. Well, not that I left it, but because I resumed studying. But eventually, I started working, and then in a number of years later, I immigrated to the United States.
Yeah, so I want to dig a little deeper into the your journey or your relationship with your siblings. So we talked about how the environment in which you grew up in. We touched on it a little bit, but now let's talk about the siblings. What was your relationship with your siblings? For me, having two sisters and, always wanting a brother, but not really having a brother. So now I have to figure out how to relate to my sisters, or now how do I have something in common with them, or establish some relationship with them. And no, my eldest sister and I we think kind of similar. I think we have a lot of my dad in us when it comes to, kind of being calm, cool, and kind of thinking through things, or maybe even the switch on and off. We'll talk about that switch on and off later because that's a big one. But but so but Lorraine, who's my middle sister, we're 18 months apart, and all I remember is it's like we clashed over and over and over and over. It was a unique experience, I'll say, because and I know she's gonna get me for saying this, but she used to promise me candy if I wouldn't tell that she was terrorizing me. so right. I could tell you that I took a lot of beatings without any candy, and 40 years, let's say 35 years have passed, and I still haven't gotten my candy, but that's another subject. but it wasn't until she left for college that I really started to appreciate the relationship that I had, because it was gone. She was in college. She was far away. I wasn't able to talk to her when I wanted to. Then I started missing the conversations that we had. I started missing her being around, and kind of, even though she was older than me, still kind of looking out for her in a sense. And so that's when our relationship went from this to this, where we were very close. So share some of your experiences. Like, were you close to your siblings all the time, or was it something that naturally grew, or did you struggle with it?
Who, me or Gabriel?
Or Gabriel? Anyone. Right. Anyone.
Well,
right, go ahead.
I mean, at least for me, like I said, I think the age difference between my sister and I almost 10 years. So I really wanted a sibling at that point. I think my mom said one time, I said, "Mom, look, if I can't have a sibling, give me a dog." and I think a few months later, she's like, "You know what? We got something better than you than a dog.
Yeah,
you have a sibling." So
yeah.
So it was nice, but like I said, but when I'm 12, she's 2. So, she's, tickling her, giggle, now she's 5, I'm 15. Okay. So, she's still my little sister. I protect her. I'm take her to the park, first day of school, that was it. But then, I graduated high school at 17. And she's 7. So, there's still, big brother, little sister, but I think at that point, that's when the gap really happened, because now I come back from college I'm 17 and a half, 18. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to hang out with my, my
Yeah.
7-year-old, 8-year-old sister. So I think
Yeah.
that created a gap.
Mhm.
As I went to college and then grad school, and she's in high school, and so I think that created the gap. But I think as we got closer, I think when we got as adults,
Mhm.
now we have more things in common. She has 2 kids, I have 2 kids,
Mhm.
and I always like to cook. All of a sudden, she's cooking. All of a sudden, into cooking and making things. So now we're comparing recipes and say, well, this is what I'm doing, and there's challenge, challenge,
Yeah.
helping each other, with the cooking and everything. So I think now, as we got older, we got that closeness. But for a long time, I think being by myself, and also I think talking about how your childhood affects your adulthood.
Mhm.
When you're 9.5 years, you get everything's for you. You get pretty much. I mean, you ask for something. There's nobody competing. So I think as an adult, sometimes when you get a spouse or something like that, it's like, well, wait a minute, So you have to learn. It's like, well, no, it's not always. So I think that's what it is. I think the advantage of having a sibling is that right away you have to learn. You have to share. You have to, whatever. But for 10 years, that was just me. So I think that kind of, when we talk about journey to the Mayan manhood, some things in your childhood will affect you throughout your manhood. One of them, I think.
No.
Mm.
Well, that's pretty good. I I had the experience and opportunity of living with some of my siblings. Now, the oldest sibling, I really don't know him very well because he was my father's child, and so he never lived with us, and so he, maybe I don't remember how many times I've actually seen him. So we never had that relationship, but with the others, there was a close relationship, and especially with the 4 of us who played sports. I mean, we were in everything, whether it was cricket, it was soccer, it was track and field, just everything. We were together with that, especially soccer, of course. Um, and we were pretty good at it. We were pretty good at it. And so we had this kind of bond of fellowship and interaction. Summertime, especially, we would just go hang out after school when you're on vacation. Well, one of my sisters, both sisters, really. I had what? I have 4 sisters. One was with the twins. One of the twins, that one died young. Um, the other 3 are one of them was living with the principal of a school, and she got into education in that way, and so on. And the other 2, one of them at one point lived with another relative, I think, in another parish, and so on. But so the youngest one of that group and I were very close, and very close, and we just had good fellowship and had a good relationship. Also, now it so happened that 2 of my brothers were close, very close to each other. They had similar tendencies, and then there was the one that I nearly cut off his toe. He and I had a very close relationship. So it's almost as if to say we had a special relationship and those 2 had a special relationship, but we all 4 had a very good relationship. And so we grew up together, of course. And then as time went by, each went to a different school, and they were involved in different activities and so on. Now, in terms of the background of religious background and and not just that, but the pecking order, if I may use that way, because as Gabe said, that he would have everything he wanted because there was no competition. But with us, there was this pecking order. I mean, if you had a certain, let's say you had a certain number of mangoes in a bowl on the table, and I wanted to have one. If I went in and looked at those mangoes and I saw that there was a big mango, another one that is maybe similar to the size, a little smaller one, and then a smaller one, I couldn't go in and take the large one.
Yeah.
It was just that kind of understanding that, the oldest would get preferential treatment, if I may say that way. And so it filters all the way down. So that kind of set also a tone for me growing up, that I had this respect for the older person or so on. And we can talk about that a little more later. But but yes, we grew up in that way, that good relationship, and our parents wanted to see us in church. They wanted us to see us in church, and if we were out on the play field playing during the time when we should be in church, that would be a problem. So we had a strong religious background.
Yeah,
that's good.
As far as my situation, I think my situation is probably a mixture, a little bit of Dr. Henry's and a little bit of Gabriel's. And I want to preface this, and I'll say this more than once, is that I've gotten to the point where I believe my parents did their best. There could have been problems, they could have been things that they didn't do correctly now that I know better. But I just say, I don't try to put blame or anything like that. I just say my parents did their best. That's what it said. So when I grew up with my younger brother and sister, that's older than me, pretty much I was young. So I was the first time I can remember, I'm like 4 or 5 years old, 3 years old, whatever. And so pretty much I kind of just follow their lead. They're my elder. I follow whatever they say, all that type of thing. Both of my parents were in the nursing field. So they were working unusual hours, that type of thing. So I don't remember a lot in my younger years, around 4 or 5 years old. I remember a lot of that dynamics. But when we moved to Miami, it created distance for my brother and sister's father. My brother and sister's father lived in New York. And over time, what happened was that you had almost 2 families living in the same household. We were still close. I still had to, listen to what they say and do all that type of stuff. But I wasn't really, like Dr. Henry said, I didn't necessarily do a lot of playing with my brother and sister. We were all in the same house. We all eat at the same table, whatever. But, I don't have a lot of stories about, going to a game together, going down the block with my brother and sister and playing the kids down the street. And so what happened was that I started to become independent, or forced to become independent in 2 ways. And this is where I kind of relate to more of Gabriel's side of the situation, is that for whatever reason, my parents decided that my father was supposed to concentrate on me and my mother was going to concentrate on my brother and sister. And so what started happening when we first moved to Miami, we drove the same car. But then over time, and we all went to church together, all sat on the same pew. But then after time, then because we couldn't get to church on time, then my father focused on getting me to church, and then my mom would come after with my brother and sister. And so then slowly during my childhood, we kind of started separating, even though we were in the same house, in the same household. So then, when it came to schooling, my father made sure I went to school, and made sure that. And then my brother and sister, my mom made sure they went to school. But, you know, because of disciplinary things, whatever, my brother and sister were allowed to get away with certain things I wasn't allowed to get away with. And sometimes it used to make me upset. So my dad, he taught me about farming and planting and all that type of stuff. And I remember sometimes I had to sweep the driveway and I'd see my brother and sister go off and I'd be like, why they get to go off and I'm sitting here working? I was like, this is foolishness. Why do I have chores, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, my dad focused on teaching me how he was raised, you know. And then it's not like I didn't interact with my mom, but over time, what happened is I started becoming closer to my dad, you know. And so he did the raising. He made sure I had a birthday party. He made sure my friends were invited. He made sure that I went to church. Made sure I went to church school, whatever, all those type of things. And so that's why I'm not surprised that when, as I got older, that my parents kind of separated, because they kind of automatically separated, during that time. But and so when it comes to my brother and sister, we kind of took two different paths. So we both went to academy together. My sister graduated from academy, but then she kind of stopped and then went into a career or whatever. She didn't go on to college. My brother, he didn't finish, but he went and got his GED later, but he didn't finish. But me, I went to academy, then I went to college, then I went to all those things. So for a long while, I was playing by myself. My dad would laugh at me that I could entertain myself. I mean, I had serious business going on when I was entertaining myself. So, back growing up, we had Matchbox cars or Hot Wheels, that type of thing,
Yeah.
and we lived on an acre lot, and so I used to have a city in the sand where I had my summer home, I had my work home, and I'm driving the cars in the sand and all that type of craziness. And my dad would just look at me and be like, and I'm just entertaining myself. I'm just like, I tried to figure out how could I put in a pool. So I tried to take saran wrap and put in the sand and pour water in there so I could have a pool in my land. But those are all the things. I mean, I remember a time, and my mom's craziest. We used to have like that industrial. It was like thin nap carpet, real thin nap. It's not like the carpet that you have outside, but it's like a very tight knit carpet. And when we lived, somehow the string, a string kind of got frayed, and then and so I want to play, so I wanted that to be my highway. So over time, I'd pull up the string so I could have a road in the carpet. So I said, "This is my carpet." I coming on the highway and all that type of stuff. But so so my dynamics when it comes to my siblings and my relationship with my brother and sister is that we're probably not as close as we could be. But I think it's a lot of it because of dynamics. Now, my older brother and sister, I did not grow up with them at all. They were already in college already, kind of like going like Gabriel's situation. They was already in college already. They graduated from college by time I was in high school. So they were. So I didn't really. I just kind of met them probably for the first time. I met them when I was like 15 years old or 14 years old, something like that. I kind of met them. Then they went away. Then I kind of met them one time again for another 2 years, and then they went away. So I'm not that close to them. It wasn't until I got older to where I can kind of control my own, travel arrangements pretty much that I at least, spent a day with them, spent a couple of days with them, went on vacation with them, that type of thing. But now it's more of an adult type relationship. And so you're not close buddy, all those type of things. And that's part of the reason why, uh, I guess we'll learn about later about your individual family dynamics. CJ and your dad is that y'all are a lot close, and so sometimes I'm not as sensitive to the closeness that y'all are because I just didn't have that type of thing, and so it's something I do want for my children, and hope that they do have that, and so I kind of look up to you all in that respects as how y'all do everything together, maybe sometimes y'all do too much together, but but anyway, y'all do a lot together, and so that's something that I just wasn't used to because my dad kind of did my raising, and he kind of took me a certain path, and then my mom did my brother and sister raising, whatever. So I mean, the best way I could describe it is that my mom did not realize she was older, and both my parents are passed, so I don't have them around anymore. But my mom, when she was living with me before she passed, um, she didn't remember that I went to high school, but I lived at home. You
Hmm.
know, I lived at home with her. My dad was already out the house already, but
Yeah.
because I was conditioned to be responsible, I got myself up in the morning. I went to school. My mom would go to work. I come home if I want to do extracurricular activities. I would work out, gymnastics, whatever. Or if I had a job, I went to work, and then made sure I got my homework done. Whatever. I went, slept, and then the other routines. So I went through pretty much my high school years doing that. And my mom's like, "You lived with me?" I said, "Yeah, mom, I lived at the house." But our paths kind of like didn't cross, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. Sorry.
So you know what? I want to jump in here just because something like that similarly happened with me growing up, in the sense that when I was the only child, my parents were. I got the attention of both my parents. It was mom, dad, all of that. But then when my sister came, at first it seemed like it was 50-50. Well, for some odd reason, I always remember the age of 12. I don't know why that sticks in my mind. The age of 12 is when I started feeling as if there was a pulling apart, where my sister became daddy's girl. Like that, she was, the apple of his eye, and just paid more attention to her. And as we grew up, I mean, 5 years later, I was in college. But I remember that distance now. I always wanted to be like I said, like Theo and on the Huxtables, But I felt even more distance after the age of 12. Like when we might have been playing hockey in the basement, whatever. That kind of stopped. And I never quite understood why, but I think that also created a distance. Already we have an age distance. But then, as adults, it was like, okay, Dorothy, you're daddy's girl, and me, I became a mommy's boy, and I think my parents also are divorced, and I think what really hurt my sister was that all of a sudden now she's not as close to my dad. All of a sudden, so now she really felt a void. It affected her. Still affects her now. The fact that, okay, wait a minute. Daddy, I was daddy's girl, and the divorce created the damage that it did. And now she felt a little bit like, okay, I'm not really. I know that you're mommy's boy, even though even parents always say, oh no, but us as siblings, we could tell.
Yeah.
Okay, we could tell. Hey, you know what, Daddy, that's you. Mommy, that's me. And so it created that void. So I don't know, sometimes, and that does affect your adulthood as well.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
I'm sorry. I'm glad you jumped in to say something, because I was going to do that too. Even though we didn't have the situation where outrightly it was that, well, my parents preferred such and such a person, but one of my brothers I know was ahead of us in terms of his schooling, and while he was studying, it's almost as if there was more resource, there were more resources directed to him in a way. While we didn't, we were not offended in terms of feeling sullen and, well, look at what they're doing for him and not for us, but we recognize that he was getting a certain kind of treatment, So it appears to me that in many families you have that kind of thing. But also I wanted to say that my my mother was, especially on a Sunday afternoon, we would play all kinds of board games. We'd play Chinese checkers. We'd play Lotto. There was one called in those days, Lotto, Ludo, Snake and Ladder, and you know, just dominoes, games and so on that we would play together, and we just relished those. And also, I must mention that in addition to the fact that the young twins died, my youngest brother, really, he died at about before he was 18. He was riding a motorbike home from a party one Saturday night and crashed and died. And then one of the older brothers, he is deceased now. He was also a minister and so on. So we had different and one of my sisters was a school teacher, of course retired now, but for years she was, and so on. So different. One was a banker and all that, but different professions within the family and so on. So there was a diverse situation or background that I come from, and when I started having children, my wife, started. We started having our children. I wanted to have a son so badly. I prayed for a son. I prayed for a son. And I'm telling you, I just wanted to have a son. But before, while I was still maybe a teenager and so on, I imagined myself getting married and having 3 children. And it's almost as if that stuck in me. 3 children. And I wanted to have a son. And when after the 2 girls came, and the year was 81, I think it was, earlier in 81. In the early part of 81, I had enlarged prostate, and the doctor thought I had cancer, and he communicated that to my wife. I didn't know. I just I just thought, well, I didn't even think about the enlarged prostate then. Just going around doing my thing, but he had communicated that to her. And I didn't know that, and I'm just going around, but I'm praying. But then, because of how I was feeling, I said, I felt kind of sick of pain. And when I heard about that situation about the prostate, then I started saying, Lord, I mean, I wanted to have a son. You mean I'm going to go out and not having a son? I mean, it was real for me, I got started praying about this thing, and finally the Lord blessed me so that I was okay. And my son came that same year.
That's all right.
Well, that's a beautiful segue. What I want to do to kind of close out the session, I want us to talk about one last question with this, because everything that we do is going to be a foundation building. So we've kind of spoken about our childhood and how our relationship with our siblings. We haven't gotten to the relationship with the parents. We kind of touched briefly on it, but we haven't gotten into that. And so the next time that we meet, the next session, we'll kind of go into the relationship that we had with our parents, and then we'll kind of talk about how that all of those experiences, from how we were raised to relationships with the siblings, relationship with the parents, how that shaped us as a man, or growing up as a boy into a man, and how we feel like all of those things came with us. But to close out this session, I want us to reflect on one thing and kind of respond to this. Do you feel that your experience as a male growing up, we know that this is a different age, there are different experiences now, but do you feel that you as a male growing up, that you had the support of more than just your family, but say the surrounding community? And that community could have been church, that community could have been close family, friends, anything surrounding that. Do you feel that you had a support system outside of your family?
Who wants to? I guess I'll go first. I would say yes. And the reason why I'm going to say yes is because I was around, in general, positive people. I did not grow up in a rough neighborhood. I'm trying to say some stuff for later. Yeah, I didn't grow up in a rough neighborhood, so I can't claim that. Some people may say, "Oh, you were middle income or high middle income, whatever." I don't think that's the case, but and so I didn't have anyone really drawing me down, anyone really, forcing me to join a gang or anything like that, whatever. So because I was in a good place, because I was being taken to church, because I went to academy, whatever, and the people that I hung around, we were all encouraged to do the right thing, and to take care of business. If you're in the age to go to school, you need to go to school, and do good, So I would say yes, I had positive influences. Now, did everyone go the same road? No. I have some people in my family that went a different route, whatever, and we'll talk about it later. But I would say in general, I had positive people and positive influence. Yes. Supported people. Yes. Correct.
Good. For me, I will say I did. I will also say, and we'll get into this later as we get into the journey, I will also say that the pressures of being a PK, or pastor's kid, for those of you who don't know, helped to kind of change and morph my experience, even with positive community around, and at church, and everyone that we've known, that we still know to this day, that kind of know what our lifestyle was. We'll get into the dual, or the split lives. We'll call it split lives, and we'll kind of get into that aspect of it. But I did have a supporting community, both in home and then at church, and even some of the neighbors as well.
Yeah, it's all right.
Well, in a weird way, I say no, and I'll tell you. I'll explain why I say no. My mom was very overprotective, so I didn't go to the neighbor's house. I played on the sidewalk by myself until I had my sibling. I didn't, she was, she wouldn't even let me go across to the park that was right across from our house. She wouldn't let me go there. So she was very overprotective. Going to church, had to be there. I hung out with my friends a little bit, but so she really put a lot of hedges around me so that I really didn't have any positive or negative. I guess that's the whole point was her. Like, look, I'm going to be the person,
the
one influencing you, me and your dad, the ones doing it.
Yeah.
So and my sibling and my uncles and everything, they lived in the Caribbean. So when I went there, Yeah, they were, they were there at the time. I still have pictures of that when I was young. My uncle would sit down and tell me about Jesus and talk about it, give me advice as a young man growing up, stuff like that. But living in Canada, because my mom was the only sibling who left Martinique to live in Canada.
Yeah.
We never had any contact unless it was the holidays. And then on the Haitian side, even though my dad had brothers and sisters who lived in Canada, we almost never hung out, which really was kind of weird. It's like my cousin lives in the same city, but I rarely saw her. Rarely saw him. I mean, we see a few times, once in a while, and that was weird for me. Like it gave me that yearning for the Cosby Show. I'm like, man, these guys, they hung out. They dance together, they do all that stuff. What's up?
Yeah.
So for me, because of that, I can honestly say I don't think there was really positive or negative. Yeah, I saw people at church, but that's once a week. And even then, my mom had the eagle eye.
Yeah.
So really, yeah, I mean, my mom was, and I think that does affect you later on.
Yeah.
My wife tells me sometimes, I'm the lone wolf.
Yeah.
I'll go biking 50 miles by myself. I don't need anybody. I'm good.
Yeah.
I think that does affect me. I don't get on the phone often with my friends. Yeah, I call them when I call them.
Yeah.
Call your friends.
Yeah.
So, but that kind of, you're growing up, what it affects you as a man. I was isolated as a kid. So now I'm okay on my own. Because for 10 years, I didn't have a sibling anyways. I was only with her for 7 years. After that, went to college on my own too. I went to Andrews by myself. I left all my friends that I had. Like a lot of people go to college with their friends. By myself. Made some friends there too. But my character was built where I'm okay being by myself, which is not a good thing. I think we all need to be social. But again, my youth kind of led me to where I am now, where I'm okay being by myself.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get clarification. So Gabriel, you didn't have friends that just in the neighborhood that you went out and played with every day?
No, not in the neighborhood. No friends in the neighborhood. I remember this one guy, we'd be on tricycles together once in a while, but not going over to sleep. I think I had a sleepover. What was that?
Oh, okay, yeah.
No such thing as that, even with cousins, we didn't have that. So my mom really was overprotective. I mean, and again, who knows? Maybe something in her childhood led her to do that. I don't know what it was, but I always tell her, and even now, I tell her, Mom, you were so overprotective. I mean, I'm still thankful to her that I can't go to the park. I'm like, Mom, I couldn't go to the park. I can't go that. Mom, the park is across the street. Now I'm resentful. As a grown man, I'm still resentful. Mom, the park is across the street. Come on, across the street. I'm still resentful now. So
yeah, that I'll agree with that. That's a little rough, brother. I was able to go down the street. I was able to go down the street. All
right. I had a good support system. I had friends outside of my family, my immediate family. But I also had, and we can talk about this another time, in terms of when I had to leave my parents' home, and then the relationships developed outside of that, and the support system, and so on, how it helped to groom me, both spiritually, mentally, and even from the point of view of nutrition, the culinary aspects of life, and so on. So there's a lot involved in that, and so on. But we can talk about that soon. But I did have a support system outside of my immediate family.
That's good. So we're gonna close off this session here, but I think this was great conversation here. And again, everything is just, setting the foundation so that we can really dig into the people that we are today. But in order to do so, we have to understand, the audience needs to understand where we came from and how we got here, and how the different traits that we received from our parents or our environment, or how we were shaped or not shaped by the environment and society, all of those things. Because I think it's very important to identify with, each one of our stories. There are plenty of people out there with similar stories, and some stories that are probably the same in some way or another. So I just want to thank each one of you again. Four mics, four men. We've got a story to tell, and when we share our story, hopefully others can be touched by the story, but can also see hope in these stories.
Yes, definitely.
Understand that they're not alone, whether they feel like this was their journey by themselves. I want everyone to be able to identify with each one of us, or if they know someone who can identify with any one of these stories, and be encouraged. The whole purpose of Four Mics, Four Men is, yes, to talk about our journey to manhood and the experiences and the things that have shaped us into the men that we are, but it's also geared towards healing those who had hurts and trauma from the past that may be similar to some of the things we may have experienced, that can see, hey, they turned out all right. They're dealing with it a different way. They've been able to overcome this. So the idea is healing the community. And so again, I want to thank you for here, and I want to thank the audience for joining us as well. And we look forward to session 2, where we dig a little deeper into each one of our backgrounds, and we start digging into who we are as a man, and then eventually get to how we deal with being a male minority in this present time. Everything that's happened up until now, and then just how do we move forward? How do we not let those things shape who we are, or to shackle our mind, so that we're not in a growth cycle, that we're not reaching out to help someone else. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Four Mics, Four Men. You'll see plenty more of our sessions live. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please come back and watch more of our episodes, and I promise you will not be disappointed. You will get some good, entertaining conversation. Unscripted, by the way. All of this is unscripted, real, raw conversation. Stay tuned. We enjoyed you joining, and we look forward to the next episode. Thank you.